I'm Beth Neville in my studio in Milton, and we're discussing and looking at the Great Wall that I've designed, and it's about African art. In this video segment, I'm going to try to explain how artists get ideas. That has always intrigued me. What makes us think of certain ideas about art that we're going to produce? And then the second problem is how to go from that imagination, that vision that we have, to something that's concrete and real that other people can appreciate and enjoy. So, in this Great Wall, there are 5 banners that I've completed that have art and fabric that's in the brown range, brown to tan. African motifs are the basis, but we're going to discuss how these were constructed and where I got the ideas. I'm going to, in this segment, try to talk a little bit about why I like working with cloth. It's been a passion of mine ever since I was a teenager and learned to sew in the 4-H. And as a young person, I made almost all my own clothes. Not nightgowns and things like that, but things I would wear to school. And when I got married, I made my wedding dress, which I still have. It was very much in the style of the era in which I got married, where things were very simple, everything was quite restrained. And I've saved pieces of cloth, and I've used that wedding cloth in other banners. This is another garment I made many decades ago. It's displayed here on one of our Guardian observer figures. It has a piece of felt foam in the bottom to give it its structure. And I also made the jacket for my daughter's wedding. It was the mother of the bride jacket. And it's made out of very expensive fabric from India, about $60 a yard. So these fabrics, I've saved all the pieces, and they've supplied me with the cloth that I need to make banners. I'm wearing the jacket that I made for my daughter's wedding, and up here in this banner, in this corner, you can see that I incorporated that fabric. Now I changed the fabric, I pieced it together by hand, and I've added various pieces of gold jewelry or metal. Here are the gold rings. Up here, hard to detect, but we can see that there are 2 earrings, gold earrings, that have been fastened to this fabric. It's a droopy fabric, very hard to get flat. It's a very, very heavy fabric. It needs a lining. So trying to get this to be really, have the flat structure that I wanted was quite difficult. These 2 banners are brand new. I just finished them this year. They're using the same type of cloth and the same feeling, the browns and tans, but they are completely new. And I want to show you how I worked out some of these banners technically with paint, with gilding, and with hand stitching. These 3 banners, 1, 2, and 3, were made by myself a number of years ago. They're hand stitched, they're made out of cloth that I owned and had. The only new thing is that in this banner, I replaced an African mask that I never really liked with this new felt mask. One of the most intriguing things about artwork is, where do creative ideas come from? I've been puzzling over that my entire 80 years of my life. What makes a person creative? Where do the ideas come from? Yes, I can see some African art in one of my early 20s on a date down in New York. And yes, I can get a sculpture from a boyfriend. And yes, I can find a Sante cloth similar to it in the local cloth store. So yeah, wow, wouldn't it be fun to make an African banner? Gosh, how hard could that be? Well, I want to show you how hard that could be. In 2002, there was an exhibit in, I believe, the Boston Museum of Fine Arts called Gold of the Akan from the Glassell collection. The collection started in Houston, Texas Museum, but moved up to the Northeast. And I went to see the exhibit and was very fascinated by the incredible detailed work that these tribal people have done with gold. Some of the images imitate in gold Western artifacts, such as this teapot. There's a pith helmet in here. There is a gun, all made out of gold. But I was looking for animal motifs because that's what interests me the most in these banners, African banners. And I found this one of a porcupine, and then this one of a dog holding a stick in its mouth. And as we'll see later, I'll show you how I incorporated these two figures into a banner. We're looking at the images in the book, and now you can see my completed dog and porcupine. They are painted with acrylic gold paint on the shiny cloth. I go to a cloth store where I buy cloth, and they feature ethnic cloth from around the world, from Africa, India, Asia, China, Korea. It's a remarkable shop. Nothing's more than $7 a yard. One of my favorite places to hang out. In this photo, we see one of the tribal leaders wearing this ornate cloth, and you can see how similar it is in vertical and horizontal pattern to the cloth I was able to buy in Dorchester. I take the cloth, cut it, and piece it together, sometimes hand stitching it and sometimes sewing it to make the pattern more elaborate. All right, I'm going to try to show you how hard can creativity be. It's a puzzle. And I think that's why artists keep doing artwork, because we want to answer that puzzle. It's like a chess piece. How are things going to fit together? So here's a tapestry. In fact, if you look around this table, I'm now started on another banner. I'll be using these cloth pieces to complete the new banner. One of the big inspirations for this banner was a wonderful tapestry, heavy material, very thick, intended for chairs and sofas that I bought out in California years and years ago. And if you look at it closely, you can see a lion, a leopard, all right, an elephant, a gazelle or an antelope or whatever. But they're all sort of, here's the elephant. But it's hard to make out these animals. And because I wanted to be African, these are African animals, I wanted to emphasize them. So my next step was to cut out two pieces of the cloth, making sure that as much as possible I got a complete animal out of it. Here's the elephant, here's the lion, the leopard. Over here, the rhinoceros, the gazelle or the antelope, and again, a panther or a leopard. But they still were hard to see. So I began sewing this down. I said, they've got to pop out more. How am I going to make that happen? For many years, I've been doing acrylic paint. Here's my box of acrylic paints. And I know you can paint on cloth. So I found a gray paint and painted in around to fill in the white areas, to make these animals stand out more. They still didn't stand out enough. So I got a black magic marker and made some additional lines around with a marker, particularly around areas like this, to make them. And the rhinoceros really needed some black marker. Still not enough. So I got my green acrylic paint and the brush and came in and emphasized. So more green, green here, green there, green over here, and so on, until I was finally satisfied that you mainly see the animals and not so much of the vegetation. This is a very strong, bold pattern here, the irregular pattern. It breaks away from the rectangles that I usually use, but it's going to be the centerpiece for this banner. This is not about gold. This is going to be more about vegetation and animals and so on. So the patterns are going to be more subdued. This pattern, I'm not sure of the origin of this cloth, but to me it looks as if it should go into an African banner. Now I've deliberately cut out some of the stripes that I want to emphasize. So here's a question. Do you put this black banner as the border? I think the answer is yes, but you have to experiment around. Is it better that way? And then if this is black, what should this border be over here? Should it be a dark brown? Well, I'm beginning to like the way that looks. Black, dark brown. So then it seems to call for black at the top. Well, if we've sided it with black or dark cloth on 3 sides, then I'm certainly going to have to find another piece of dark cloth to go over here. And I don't have it. So, well, okay, I've got to go back to the store and buy another piece of dark fabric. This fabric is definitely not African. Its origin is probably India, perhaps, or 18th, 19th century. I'm not enough of a historian of fabric to be able to tell, but its floral decoration and its entwine, to me, looks very European, but it's brown and it's maroon, and that picks up this color and that color, and I just like that fabric. So I think it's going to get incorporated, even though it's definitely not of African origin. The same is true for this maroon. Okay, supposing we have the brown over here. Let's just say, okay, we've got the brown here, all right? Why not have this beautiful maroonish color on this side, as well as this on this side? There's another technical problem worth mentioning in making hand-stitched banners, and that is buckling of the cloth and you're using cloth of different weights. Some is tapestry, some is satin, some has a tight weave, loose weave, and it's extremely difficult to get these things so that they don't have warps and buckles. That's always one of the major problems I have, and it's pretty obvious here. As I stitch around here and stitch around here, this fabric got puckered up, and no amount of ironing is going to get rid of that pucker. I just have to say, well, that's part of what happened. Now, the interesting thing about hand-stitched banners is that they can be stitched a large number of ways in terms of how the stitching is actually done. I try to make sure that those knots are not visible. One technique, which is the easiest, is to do a little running stitch. And when I do this, then the stitching becomes part of the decoration. And as I said before, I think it adds a handcrafted look to what's being done instead of having everything stitched on the machine. Fortunately, I don't have any arthritis in my hands, and most women my age are beginning to have arthritis. And also I have excellent eyesight, so I can still thread a needle, which is miraculous, I do believe, given my age, and also manipulate the needle without any problem. So that's one type. It's just a running, what we'd call a basting stitch if you were doing it in 4-H. Okay, now I'm going to put this knot on the back, and I'm going to demonstrate to you the other way of getting these things down, and that is this one. It doesn't show as much, and I'm actually doing it backwards. I should be starting from the other side, but I can start from here. This one, you slip the needle underneath and come up right at the very edge. This is almost like a hemming stitch. You go down and come up at the very edge there, and with this one, you hardly see the seam at all. So you see the fabric on top of the giraffe fabric is on top of the brown fabric, but you don't see the stitch. For these animal things, I want to emphasize the fact that they're hand-stitched. I'm not interested in disguising the fact that these were sewn by hand. I want to flaunt it, make it a big deal. So much of this is going to be machine-stitched that I think it's important to have some hand stitching in here. Now here's another problem, and a reason why it's easier to do these by hand than with a machine. You could see the fabric is starting to kind of buckle up over here. It's very important. I want that to be a square as much as possible, so I'm kind of pulling on it a little bit, and that's as far as I can get with this piece of thread. So we're going to go back down but you can see the difference, okay? The hem stitching here, or blind stitching, and the running stitch or basting stitch there. I'm going to attach, or try to attach, these Asian beads to the fabric. And my idea is, I think they look like nuts or some kind of fruit or other. So I'm going to come up through the fabric, and I think what I'm going to do is make like a little tie there. I just think that might be a good idea. Don't know why, it just seems sensible. Then I'm going to go through the bead. There's a hole in it. Now I don't want to pull it too tight, because I don't want the thread to be the dominant thing that you see. I want the bead itself to be, yeah, right? What do you think? Well, it's kind of flipping around. I don't know, I hope this is going to work. Okay. So now I'm going to hold that down. Wow, this is going to be hard. Okay. Get this thing, oh, good grief. What is that doing in there? Get rid of that. And now, tie it. This may not work. As art, always experimenting. No, that's why it's artwork and not mechanical engineering. My African sculpture book that I've treasured for many decades was purchased for only $2 in New York City. Naturally, it's a black and white. I've been looking through this book for suggestions of imagery that would be appropriate for my African banners. We're going to spend a few minutes discussing how I reinterpreted this exquisite African mask. Artists have been reinterpreting each other's work for centuries, going all the way back to cave art. So this image is not a duplicate of an African mask, but my own interpretation. I want to have the second row of the face is too narrow. So if we bring it out, I want this to have an indentation here and have this scarification set of lines be different from this. So that's a very deliberate decision. Then the most complicated thing to interpret is the black and white cap or headdress that's over the eyes. It's extremely complicated. It has a circle here, which is intersected by two diagonal lines here. This goes straight across, and this comes straight down. Then there's additional information back there. Also, I'm omitting the scarification marks on the nose. I think that would be too complicated to interpret. So, after many hours of cutting, pasting, and stitching, I've gotten this far with that mask image. And the way I'm doing it is cutting out the little white triangles, then putting a dot of Elmer's glue on the back of each one to sort of secure it, and then stitching it all the way around with white thread. The question with this figure as a mask are the horns. This is one of these wonderful African figures that has both human and animal characteristics. So they look like, antelope horns perhaps. And I got the idea that maybe I would want to make them a little more truncated and look like horns that belong to another figure that was in here. This figure, actually. I thought, I kind of like that wooden look there. That one is also from the former Belgian Congo. Also, this has, again, strong triangular scarification and a cap. That's quite interesting. But I said, nah, I don't like that. So I'm going to redo the horns to be just a little bit more dramatic, and also to carry the white line up into there. And I think as soon as you add that white line, then it connects white. Oh, by the way, he lost an eyebrow. I don't know where his eyebrow is, but it'll turn up. He's got an eyebrow here. So, and then these would also be fastened down with aggressive hand stitching. And I think that's about all I'm going to do for this figure. I think I like the brown background. I think that's just about right for it. These small white patches will be used to represent the patches around the mouth. You can see I've changed the shape of the lips and added a dark line. One interesting thing, my granddaughter and I went to a shop in Madison, Wisconsin, and we found these beads. And the beads are handcrafted, and they were made in Nigeria. So perfect for eyes. As soon as I stitched them on, the eyes kind of popped out, and the three little white lines particularly give the mask a sort of an animation that it didn't have before I put them on. This is the completed African mask. Several things got changed, and for the better. One of the things was the shape of the mouth. I realized I had made a Western-style mouth with the indentation here, and as soon as I filled in that indentation, the figure became much truer to the African aesthetic. Up here, this was extremely difficult to complete, with lots of additions of more black felt and more stitching, hand stitching all the way around. I think the eyes are absolutely wonderful. I'm so pleased with those. I calculated that in the end, it took me 20 hours to complete the hand stitching on the mask, but I enjoyed every minute of it. This upholstery border also helps to set off and frame the African mask. The two smaller banners each contain one animalistic image based on three-dimensional tribal sculpture, and we'll discuss these for a moment. These two figures were done many years ago on these banners. They're both based on African sculpture, and what a fantastic image of one African animal supporting another that appears to be leaping over it. It's cut out of felt, and we can see a lot of hand stitching in here to create the texture. This one, a similar figure, also very famous in African sculpture, the springing animal, antelope, the sense of the movement, the spring going forward at great clip, enhanced here again with hand stitching. This is batik dyeing. It's half of the turtle. The other turtle appears up here at the top. This is the other half of the turtle. And then this piece of cloth I found also very interesting. This is not African. This is based on Western American Indian glyphs. This is the second new banner of African motifs that we finished. It's part of the Great Wall. The painted figure of the porcupine and the dog remain as I originally intended. The beads, these metal beads or chain or whatever it is, became part of a vertical, emphasizing a vertical frame for those figures. The brown is there, the tan carries all the way around, but the beads add some sparkle. Remember that these images are based on Afghan gold sculpture. That was their favored medium, was working with gold. I hope that this discussion of the technical means by which I produce these banners will be of interest. In the next segment, we're going to talk about how the colorful orange and maroon banners were made out of kente cloth. And we'll discuss design problems and technical problems in making these banners. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've learned a little bit about where artists get ideas, how they work multi-generational with myself, with younger artists and helping me, technical assistance, and also how we technically put things together so that we have both the imagination and the technique to turn these ideas into actual physical works of art. Thank you.